Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to make a quick introduction um, to our speaker. Azar Lalden is a co-founder and managing director of Winnipeg-based Castellan Information Security Services. Azar has 25 years, and I'm thinking probably more than that, of experience in the information technology field. He has delivered projects for education, agriculture, financial services, telecommunications, healthcare, insurance sectors, and others. Over the last 10 years, Azar has focused on cybersecurity and information services. The theme of today's presentation is understanding information and cybersecurity, why you need to protect your data, and how to do it. One of Azar's skills is to explain a complex subject in a way we can all understand. There will be time at the end to ask some questions. You can also use the chat feature to ask questions that we will try to answer during the session. And before we start, we also want to thank you all for joining us today. So Azar, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Murray. I'm going to share my screen as well. And while I'm doing that, I was hoping to see some of the folks from Minnedosa here, because one of the last presentations that I did similar to this, which was in person, was for the Minnedosa Chamber of Commerce. It was Monday, March 9th, 2020. And 4 days later, our province went into a lockdown. So has a little bit of a special space in my heart for that particular presentation, because it was the last time I was in a group setting. And now I think we're getting back to some of these where a number of the sessions that Marie's arranged are in person with some of the chambers. So let's see. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Looks good, Adam.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so let's get right through it. Murray just did a quick intro, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we're a Prairie born and bred company. We're providing end-to-end information security services. That's our bread and butter. We are a member of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce as well, and that's partly the reason we're reaching out to chambers such as yourself. And we have extensive experience in quite a few sectors that a lot of people don't think a company based out of Winnipeg will have, such as federal law enforcement, crown corporations, telecom, IT, financial services, and so on. So, and we work extensively with professional associations, as well as non-profit and charitable organizations also. Just a quick slide to share with you the depth of experience and knowledge that we have within our company. We're kind of proud of this slide, because it expresses the fact that we are not sitting back and just letting cybersecurity pass us by. Our team is constantly going out, getting certifications, recertifications to make sure that they're on the leading edge. Why do we need this presentation? And the primary reason for that is that information security is a growing threat, and it's affecting organizations and companies of all shapes and sizes, regardless of where they're located. Most business leaders, what makes this complex is that most business leaders either don't have sufficient knowledge of the issue, which makes sense. Their job is to run the company and make sure that they're making the widgets and selling the widgets and keeping the company profitable, or they don't have in-house expertise. So they've either outsourced their IT function and think that that's partly where security is done as well, or they don't have enough people in-house to provide security or the security lens, or they consider that the costs for many of these cybersecurity solutions are price prohibitive. They're way too expensive. They're for bigger companies, and how can we even afford to have proper security controls in place? So the intent of this presentation is to raise the awareness on why this is an important issue for you and for your organization, and what can you do to secure your organization. So with that preamble and a bit of intro, we're going to get right into it. The agenda is fairly straightforward. We're going to look at a few information security myths and kind of bust them as we talk about those. Some of the current trends, impacts of a data breach, what happens to you if your company is breached, what are some of the threats to your information, and then a framework for security. And I think where we really hope you'll get some value out of all of those topics, but specifically is once you know what the threats are and what the impacts are to your organization, what can you do? What are some of the best practices that you can take back and start implementing? And of course, we're hoping to have and planning to have some time at the end for some questions and answers as well. So a few myths. One of the myths that we constantly hear about is that cybersecurity risks are not real. That's not true at all. I think with the amount of news media and coverage that we're getting, I hope everyone now understands that these are real risks with real people that are carrying out these threats and risks against companies like ours. So these risks are not just in a fairy tale or in a science fiction novel or in a movie. They are real world threats and risks that affect everybody. The other myths we hear is that the impacts of the data breach or a ransomware attack are not significant, and that's not true either. We're going to look at some of the impacts, but it's been documented and researched that most of the small to mid-size organizations, if they have a significant data breach, within about 18 to 24 months, they will either have a significant loss of revenue or they will go out of business just because they cannot sustain the cost of recovering or the cost of putting systems in place. So the impacts of these attacks are significant. The other one that we hear is that these threats apply only to big businesses. We hear about the Indigo breaches or the Sobeys or Equifax or CRA and things like that. So I'm a small company. I'm in Manitoba. Who's going to care about me or come after me? And that's not true. The malicious actors are only looking for data, and the credit card that your customers use to buy from you is the same credit card they use to buy Apple Music or services from big providers. And the threat hunters or the threat malicious actors are looking for the easy breach that they can execute. And sometimes that is the smaller to mid-sized companies, regardless of the geography they're in. Information security is only about information technology. That's another myth we hear. I've got my IT person, they take care of my IT assets, and therefore I know that they can do security. And those are two very separate practices and expertise. So this is a myth that the IS people are all, or information security people are the same as your information technology people. And the last one, which we're starting to hear a lot about, is my data is secure because it's in the cloud. We're moving to a cloud instance and therefore everything is fine. And that's not true. That's not true either. We've seen data breaches. We'll have an example of that later on. The cloud service provider is responsible for the security of the cloud. But as the owner of the data, you are still responsible for security in the cloud. So again, a myth, I'm moving everything to the cloud, therefore I'm secure. Not true at all. What are some of the key numbers just to share with you? These numbers are from the last couple of years. Almost 2/3 of mid to small sized businesses have said that they've suffered from a cyber attack in the last 24 months. That's a big number. 2/3 of small businesses or mid-sized businesses have been attacked by someone. Every 11 seconds around the world, there is a ransomware attack. In 2019, this number was around 14 seconds. So the number of ransomware attacks has gone up significantly, where they've shaved off, 3 seconds off that frequency. We're up to or down to about 11 seconds. And I think once we see the numbers for 2023, most likely that number is going to be under 10 seconds. Less than $500 is the average amount that a small business spends on their cybersecurity equipment. That could be the router that they're purchasing from the local electronics shop, or the antivirus software that they're purchasing, but they're spending less than $500 on anything to protect their information. That's not enough, certainly not enough. $1 is the cost that a malicious actor has to spend to buy a hacking kit or a ransomware kit on the dark web. So the barriers to entry for that criminal side of this equation are very low. Somebody can go on the dark web, spend $1, buy a cybercrime toolkit, and target one of the businesses that they want to target, and it's easy as that. The $459 billion is the amount that companies, governments around the planet are expecting to spend by 2025 on cybersecurity initiatives and technologies and upgrades and all of that stuff. That's a big number. That's a good number. And it's gone up again over the years. But this next number kind of blows our mind. The size of the global cybercrime economy by the same year is 10.5 trillion. So the payback for the criminals is about 30 times what we are planning to spend on securing our systems. So huge discrepancy between what we're spending versus what the cyber criminals are expecting to make in the next couple of years. Some current trends. There's more stringent laws around security. Even Canada is starting to come around and starting to put some more security around, or more laws around cybersecurity, protecting customer data, and so on. Europe was the first one when they implemented GDPR. White House just released a cybersecurity policy just a few weeks ago. So we're starting to see there being more laws around protecting customer data or employee data. And the businesses, because of that, have to put more security in place so that they're not in breach of these laws. There's also going to be an increase in demand for security skills and personnel. So, if you're thinking of a career change, or you've got somebody in your life that's thinking of a career change, that's probably a good career to go into and become a security expert. There's certainly lots of demand for that. There's also a widespread adoption of the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things basically is anything that can connect to the Internet. My wife and I were just at Home Depot a few weeks ago, and we were looking for a fridge. And there was this beautiful Samsung fridge, and it was connected to the Internet. I'm not sure why my fridge needs to be connected to the Internet, but that's where we're going. Our home alarm systems, garage door openers. There are so many things now, pretty much everything now, light bulbs, come with internet connectivity. So what that means is that all of these consumer devices are now becoming bigger targets. And because of the number of these devices is increasing, the attack surface is increasing, and not every product that's on the market is actually a secure product. So you have to be very, very careful about what you're purchasing and adding. The attackers are also becoming smarter, bolder, more commercial. They're becoming less traceable as well. And because of this, because of this boldness that they have now, and the skill that they're developing, the breaches are becoming more complex and harder to beat. It took Indigo, I think, weeks, even a few months to get back to where they could get their website back up and running and so on. Sobeys had a long period between the discovery of the attack to when they were actually able to start doing business back on their internet-facing assets, and their pharmacies, I think, were out of commission for a long time. And because of all of these, one of the trends that we're going to see, and I think you may be seeing this already as you're working with your insurance providers, is that cyber risk insurance is becoming more of a norm, and it's becoming more of a requirement. Even for ourselves, our cybersecurity or our insurance provider, we have to fill out the cyber insurance form. And if we don't comply with their requirements, our premiums go up. And I think some of you might actually be experiencing that, But what's that doing now is either you pay the extra premium or you invest in good security and your premiums drop, but now you also know that your information is protected properly. What are some of the impacts of a data breach? And this is not a pleasant number at all. So the average cost per breached record in 2020, I think it was around $199 Canadian. And in 3 years, it's gone up by 12%. It's gone up to $224 per breached record. So what is a breached record? So if you do business with a customer and they buy something from you, they buy something from you and you process their credit card once for one transaction, that is one record for that customer. But you probably have a customer history. So every record of everything that they've done is the number of records that that customer has with you. So one record breached will cost you $224 to recover. But I don't know of any business that only has one customer who has only ever done one transaction with them. So if you've got one customer with 10 records, you're looking at 224 times 10. Or if you've got 10 customers with one record each, it's still the same, 224 times 10. If you've got 100 records, it's 224 times 100. So you're looking at $22,400 for recovery. The average cost for a company is around 5.93 million per Canadian. And that's gone up from 5.26 just a couple of years ago. That number I kind of take with a little bit of a grain of salt, because that 5.93 will include, for example, the 25 million that Sobeys spent on their recovery, or whatever amount of money the Newfoundland's healthcare system spent, or whatever amount of money Indigo spent on their recovery. So it includes all the big breaches as well. But suffice it to say, what it means is that the cost to an organization is significant. And it's even worse for smaller companies, because we don't have deep pockets like the Indigos and the Sobeys of the world. Because what happens is that there's a double whammy. There's a double-barrel shot that we get. First of all, when a breach happens, we lose the ability to generate revenue. All the systems have to be shut down because we don't know what the extent of the damage is. And what that means is that we're not making the widgets that we sell. We're not selling our services. And not selling means we have no revenue. So that's one tap that's been turned off. But then the other side is that we've now opened up a new hole in our bank, which is we're paying to fix the problem. So the costs of containment, the cost of recovery, we're not only not making money, but we're also bleeding whatever we had in our savings account. So it's a double whammy that happens and hits customers, hits companies really, really hard. And that's primarily the reason why many of the mid and small size companies within 18 to 24 months after breach will have either a significant loss of revenue or will actually have to close shop. There are also some non-financial impacts. Litigation from affected customers. If a customer wants to go after you because you did not protect their information, you did not take reasonable steps to affect their information, that could happen. There could be litigation. You also lose face in the marketplace. Your reputation is tarnished with your existing customers, your existing supply chain partners, your suppliers, your bank, people that you do business with, or people that support your business. Your relationships are damaged, especially companies whose information had been breached. They're going to think twice about doing business with you and carrying on a relationship with you. Plus, you hit the news, and nothing is worse than being on, your local TV channel or your local newspaper as the company that didn't protect the customer's data. You lose trust, you lose potential revenue streams. People think twice about doing business with you or coming on board with you. And what's the second last bullet is actually especially important, because you may have some intellectual property. You may have a process that's your competitive advantage, and now that's been breached, and now that's out in the open, and suddenly you've lost your competitive advantage in the marketplace. Your trade secrets are gone, your proprietary information is gone. So now anybody can pick up that information and start infiltrating your space that was protected prior to the breach. And then there's, of course, legal action for breaches and non-compliance. The governments are getting tighter, as I said. We now have to report if we consider, if we think that there's been a breach, we have to report it to the government and let them know that there's been a breach. And then they're on top of you because they want to know what the extent of the breach was. What did you do to fix it and contain it? And what are you doing to make sure it doesn't happen again? So there could be legal action and fines from regulatory bodies and governments. So what are some of the threats to your information? There's two types: internal threats and external threats. Insider threats typically include employees, and these could be professionals whose job was to get a job with you and then infiltrate your organization. It could be malicious. An employee did not get the vacation they wanted, or did not get the raise that they thought they should have got, or got a poor performance review, and now they want to hurt the company back. Negligent, they don't know how to process credit card information, for example, or they were trained, but they don't pay attention. They're not exercising due diligence, so they're negligent. And in doing that, they're causing harm to the organization. Or compromised. Someone wants to leave the company and somebody says, hey, can you just tell me how your employer does this, or how many companies they have in this sector, or clients they have. So an employee could be compromised. There's also mistakes and sloppy processes. I talked about managing credit card information. So was the employee trained properly? Are there properly defined and documented processes for stuff like that? That is critical to the business, which includes gathering information, gathering data, but also destroying data. How do we get rid of data that was collected? There's also loss of data, like USB sticks getting lost, or equipment getting stolen, and or getting lost, and so on. Conflicts of interest, unauthorized access, somebody who is not supposed to have access. Let's say somebody is an accountant, they're not supposed to have access to the HR information of employees, but they do, and they go in and they find out the social insurance number, or healthcare records, and so on. So unauthorized access is another reason. Storytelling, we love to tell stories around the fireplace in the summer, and fire pits, but that's probably not the wisest spot to tell inside stories about your company, and favors, like, hey, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And all of those things can be addressed with proper training and proper process in place as part of your governance practices. The external side is what gets the most attention. This is the stuff that Hollywood makes movies on. The hackers and the malware and the ransomware attackers. And ransomware is the most nefarious of all of these attacks. It's the easiest one to be executed. You get an email that looks legit. There's a link in there that looks legit. You click on it, and it deploys code into your system, and it starts encrypting your system, so you can't access them. And then the attacker reaches out to you and basically says, if you want access back to your system, you've got to pay us X amount of dollars, and we'll give you the decryption key. Now, in the past, we used to tell our customers, just make a really good backup, so that when that happens, or if that happens, we can recover from the backups. But the hackers have gotten more nefarious and more malicious. So what they do now is that they will actually exfiltrate your data. They remove it. So you have the encrypted copy still on your systems, but they also have removed and made a copy of it on their own systems. So if you say to the hackers, we're just going to recover from our backups, the hackers are now going to threaten you that they'll release that information onto the dark web, and they can, because they have the decryption key. So really terrible to see this progression, but it's happening now. Password attacks, denial of service attacks, where they'll just bombard your website or whatever your system is. If you've got a form on your contact us type of form on your system, they'll just attack it, overwhelm your system. And basically what that means is that nobody else can get into your systems. Your legitimate customers can't get into your systems. Man in the middle typically happens when you're, let's say, sitting at a coffee shop, and there's free Wi-Fi. So you connect using the free Wi-Fi, you connect to your company or you connect to your bank, except that your connection is not encrypted. So what that means is that it's not secure, and anybody sitting there with malicious intent can actually insert themselves into your connection, grab your credentials, figure out which company you're connected to, which bank you're connected to, and so on. Drive-by downloads, you go to a website and so on, and you download something and it's pushed down to your site. So just be careful about browsing the internet. Just go to sites that are reputable, that are well known, and so on. And hardware theft obviously is one of the other most prevalent external threats. You go on a business trip, you leave the office or the client's office, you throw the laptop bag in the back seat of your rental, and off you go for supper. Except that now you have your laptop sitting in the back seat. So simple things, throw it in the trunk before you leave the client site. A lot of these solutions for these high-tech crimes can be actually very low-tech solutions, like putting your laptop in your in the trunk of your car, and so on. So that's some of the threats that come after you if you're an organization that's doing business. There's a couple of recent examples. I mentioned a couple already. So Western Digital is a huge hard drive maker. They have data storage capability in the cloud. It's called MyCloud. They were breached just a few weeks ago. But that's, we think of those companies that typically get breached. Or we think of locally companies like the Sobeys of the world or the Indigos of the world that will get breached. But the truth is that, like I said, breaches happen to companies of all sizes. So just recently, there's a spa in Winnipeg called Thermea. Their parent company, Nordic Spa, was just breached just a couple of weeks ago. Just a few months ago, there's a long-term care facility, St. Amant Center in Winnipeg, that had a data breach, and it took them a long time to recover. And then, we typically think of these attacks being launched from outside, and typically outside North America. But I was surprised when I read this. There was a young man in Brandon sitting in his basement and launching thousands of cyber attacks against companies in North America. He's been apprehended. He's been thrown in jail. And he's only 20 or 21. So just a young kid who's decided that this is the career path that he's choosing. But I was surprised that even in our own backyard, we were having hackers and malicious actors. There's a couple of things to think about when you think about information security. It's a three-tipped, triangle. It's a triangle, so it's got three tips. But there are three things you should consider. There should be a good set of processes that you have in place. Clearly documented and regularly updated processes on how to handle data, how to onboard a new employee, how to offboard an employee who's leaving, and so on. What do you do for all of those things? There should also be a good set of technologies that you have. So the products that you're buying should be commercial grade, not the consumer grade type of services and products that you're using. And then the last piece is your people, your staff. You have to invest in training your staff. If you don't train them, you can't expect them to respond and be the front line of defense. And quite honestly, my view on this is you can have the best written processes in place. You can have the most sophisticated technology that you've invested in, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if you haven't trained your people all of that is moot. You're not going to be able to keep your organization secure. So it is a three-pronged approach, but one of the most critical ones is investing in your people and making sure that they are trained to detect if there's an attack going on, to report if they think there's an attack going on, and then to be able to respond. What do we do if there is an attack in progress? So that was all doom and gloom up to this point. But what are some of the things that you can implement? What are some of the best practices that you can implement in your organization? So first and foremost, you have to implement a formal information security policy. And what that does is it can have different components. It can have a technology use agreement. So the employees can't use their company issued equipment, phone, laptop, desktop, for personal use. They can't install a game off the internet for their child on this or for themselves on a company owned machine. Password management policy, non-disclosure agreements, things like that have to be in place, and those are all captured within your information security policy. And those can be a really good deterrent for someone who is thinking about doing something malicious. So that could be a really good deterrent and a good foundation for everything else. Identify all information assets. A lot of times when we're talking to clients, we ask them, where do you keep your information? And they'll say, oh, we have a server, we have laptops with Excel on them or spreadsheets on them, and so on, or we've got a cloud service where we store everything. But most often they don't think about the USB drives, the memory drives, and they almost never think about printers and fax machines, for example. Gone are the days when you stuck a page, in the top of a fax machine and it came out on the other side and it was, over the phone lines, it went to your recipient. Most of the fax machines and printers now have built-in hard drives. So when you send a job to print, or when you are faxing something, there's an image of that document that's being stored on the hard drive in that machine, the printer or the fax machine. So when you're done with that, when the machine is gone and you discard it by, I don't know, throwing it into the junk, or somebody comes and picks it up, everything that had gone through that system or that printer or the fax machine, all of that data is going on the hard drive. So, again, a critical thing to think about. So identify all your information assets, not just the hardware, but also the software. So what are your financial systems? Do you use spreadsheets? Do you store data in forms, electronically or on paper? So it's critical to identify all your information assets. Identify and classify. So not all data are crucial to protect, but that's where this step comes in. You need to classify all your data. You need to know whether you're collecting highly sensitive information, like somebody's driver's license or someone's passport or social insurance number, because those can be used in combination with other data. Those could be used to create a fake identity, for example, or personally identifiable information, date of birth, personnel data, your employee data, things like that. Classify those. Business critical, you have a process that you invented and it's your competitive advantage in the marketplace. Where is it kept? Who has access to it? And how is it classified? So it's critical to know what type of data you're collecting, because your response for how you protect it will depend on what the classification of that data is. And of course, financial data. This is critical. It's your own company's information, so your own banking information, your own credit card information, payroll, obviously, but also if your customers are paying you with those same details, with a credit card or with a banking information, because they're paying you via a bank deposit or something like that. Very important to know what type of financial data you're collecting and where it's from and who owns it. Conduct regular security training for employees. I can't stress this enough. I think this should be on a regular company calendar. the security training that can be done, that should be done on a regular basis for your employees. And the reason it needs to be done regularly is because while some things stay the same, things don't all stay the same. So there is always new threats that are coming out. There's always new techniques that are coming out to be more protected and more aware of what's happening. So it's vital to make sure your employees are being trained on a regular basis. Conduct regular internal audits. If you have an external third party that you work with, get them to do an audit for you. This is one of the things that that will reveal to you where some of those gaps are, operationally, process-wise, and so on. So make that kind of a regular habit as well. Conduct regular vulnerability assessments. And what I mean by vulnerability assessments is that you bring someone in and you give them access to your systems. And what they do is they do a scan of all of your systems. So whether it's internet-facing stuff or internal stuff, they do a scan and they come up with a list of what the vulnerabilities are on your system, whether it's
Cybersecurity.
patched or not. So making sure that
I'm
you're
muted.
doing vulnerability assessments and getting a
I
picture
don't do Zooms with
where you're
video
weak.
or audio.
The other thing that's kind of the flip side of that, or paired with that, is penetration testing for critical systems. Similar, but a little bit more in depth, especially for assets that are facing the internet. So what happens is a security expert will discover the vulnerabilities on your systems, but then they actually try to exploit those systems. And there's different layers of exploitation that they can do in discussion with you. But they will try to exploit and see how far they can get into your system. And obviously, then they'll make some recommendations on remediating those vulnerabilities. Invest in updating your technology assets as well as physical assets. If your business is running on the router that the internet service provider gave you, change the default password on that right away, first of all. But even better, invest in something that's commercial grade. Gone are the days when a firewall or a router was thousands upon thousands of dollars. I think the companies are making smaller scaled technologies now, targeted for mid to small size companies that are in a good price range, but they give you a whole lot more security than you would get from a consumer grade asset. Also your physical assets. So wherever you keep your filing cabinets, where all the records are kept, for example, make sure that the door to that building or to that office is a commercial grade security door. And again, you'll have to pay a little bit more than the $169 hollow core door at Home Depot, but it protects your information. So invest in securing your assets. Just a couple more slides left on this. Can't beat good password management policy. You've got to make sure that there's proper password management done. Part of that is when an employee leaves, making sure that their passwords are changed right away. Part of that is making sure your employees are setting up passwords that are complex, that are long, to make sure that they're not easily breakable. So make sure that you're enforcing a good password policy. Have formal processes in place. I think I've touched on these two already a bit. When you're bringing on a new employee, make sure that you're doing credit checks, you're doing police background checks, and so on and so forth. Maybe even do a search on their social media to see what they do. You don't want to bring an employee on who has some radical ideas that are completely opposite to your organization's core values. So you want to make sure that you do that. But also when an employee is leaving, make sure you grab all your corporate assets, the laptops, the keys, the computers, remove all of their access to corporate systems. One of the systems that we use for all of our staff, including my laptop, is that if it gets lost or if I go rogue, one of the managing directors can actually call one of our folks and say, lock Azur's laptop. And they can send out a command. And as soon as I turn my laptop on, the very first thing that happens is that It gets the command and it locks the computer. So I can't go in even with my credentials. Even if I have my laptop still linked to my account, you can't get in. So there's lots of tools now where you can control what happens with your machines once an employee leaves. Establish business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan. Cannot stress enough how crucial this is. If something happens, what will you do? I think this is these are the if scenarios that we don't want to happen, but we have to know what we will do if something happens. There can be some very creative exercises that you can do around that, but you need to know how your business can be attacked, what kind of threats can derail it, even to the point of you losing the ability to do any business. And what are your plans for recovery? How are you going to make sure that your business gets back up and running and starts producing the widgets and so on and so forth? So BCP and DRP, very, very critical, but not just creating them, but also testing them. So make sure you do that. And then as a leader or an owner of a company or an organization, you have to create and support a culture of information security. You can send your employees to all kinds of trainings, you can tell them what to do, you can write all kinds of policies, but if you don't demonstrate what you're asking them to do, the effect is going to be very minimal. They're not going to do what they don't see you doing. So you have to create and support a culture of information security. Establish policies and practices, not just for your IT records, but also for your non-IT records. And then finally, understand the damage to your organization. And that could be part of your business continuity planning and the disaster recovery planning. You have to know what the worst case scenario is if something were to happen to your organization. So those are some of the best practices. What can you do? There's a few things. Educate yourself and your staff. I'm not going to spend too much time on here because we've talked about most of these. Recognize that your team, your IT team, or your IT service provider may need external help. They may not have the skills and the expertise to do cybersecurity or information security for you. Remember that you are still responsible for the security of all of your data, even if it's in the cloud, not just on-prem. And change your organization's culture regarding information security. Only you can change that as a leader. It's entirely up to you to make sure that you lead the charge on how information should be handled within the organization. Understand the value of the data that you collect. People are trusting you with very special information about themselves, and you need to know that you are a steward of their data. Develop a plan to make sure that you are taking incremental steps. I think a lot of times this can completely overwhelm a person in terms of what they need to do, but take incremental steps. Starts with the lowest hanging fruit. Maybe it is switching out, your consumer grade router with a commercial grade router, and that's a good first step. But come up with some incremental steps that fit your capacity, your business, your budget, and your operations. And what are some of the possible areas of vulnerabilities and security gaps? If you don't know where your weaknesses are, you're not going to be able to address them. And then establish targets for improving the overall security. By the end of this year, we will have these security measures in place. By the end of next year, we'll have 2 or 3 or 4 additional security controls in place. So you should have a roadmap that you're following. But most importantly, don't be overwhelmed. First of all, don't be overwhelmed, and start somewhere. You just have to start. You just have to start somewhere to get a handle on your information security policies, practices, people, and products. How can Castellan help? Like I said, we're an end-to-end service provider. So I'll probably just highlight maybe a couple of the services here. Our top left corner, vulnerability assessments. We do that as a fairly regular practice for lots of companies around the province, actually around the country. We have customers out east as well. And the idea is doing the scan, discovering vulnerabilities, and then providing the remediation for those. We also do staff augmentation. So if you don't have staff on site, or if your team is too small, we can provide expertise that way as well. I'm going to jump over to the last ball on that top row, Security Operations Center. What a Security Operations Center does is it monitors your systems, and it monitors your systems 24/7. We have our security analysts that are monitoring all the feeds that are coming from all our customers, and they're looking for patterns. There's some automated responses built in as well. And their job is to look for anomalous behavior on your systems. And if they detect something, then they have the ability to either contain it right away, or if you're a bigger shop and you have your own security people, to inform you and let you know that there's a possible attack in progress or something malicious, and they can help you stop that. Penetration testing ties in with vulnerability assessment, where we try to go in and exploit the vulnerabilities that we've discovered to see how far a malicious actor can get in. And then, of course, our flagship product is the Integrated Information Security Assessment, where we don't look at just IT side of your house. We look at operations, we look at your governance, we look at non-IT practices, HR practices, and come up with a very extensive review of your current state of security within the organization, paired with recommendations, strategic recommendations, tactical recommendations for each gap that we discover. And in that spirit, I guess for today, there's a number of couple of free offers we have for the attendees and for, I guess, all the members of the chambers that we're presenting to today. I'll just walk you through that. So I mentioned our SOC that we have. It's actually been titled Crimson Shield to kind of stay in step with our Castellan identity. But our free offer is that for 3 months, we can monitor up to 10 of your endpoints, endpoint being a laptop or a computer or a system that connects to the internet, for example. So we can monitor 10 of your critical assets that we can help choose with you. We'll do that for 90 days. You'll get a report every few weeks in terms of what we're finding. If there's anything malicious going on, one of our analysts will call you right away and let you know what they've discovered and how we want to handle that. But that's something you can try out, and there's no commitment after the 90 days. You can reach out to myself, Brent, or Murray, and we can help you try that out. And so that's one of our offers. The second offer is a free security assessment. So it's kind of a pared down version of our integrated information security assessment. But essentially the idea is to look at some of your critical business processes, your technologies, and so on, and try to uncover some of the critical vulnerabilities or gaps that you may have from a security perspective. We can do that assessment. One of our analysts works with you. That particular piece of work goes directly through my fingers, so I'm involved in every single assessment that we do. Brent acts as kind of a second brain and second set of eyes and ears, but it goes through right through our fingers and right through our hands, so we know exactly what's been done. And that also, again, is an offer without any commitments. We can do the offer for you, give you the report. And in either case, the SOC 90-day trial or the free assessment, if at the end of the engagement you feel there isn't any value, you did not see any value, we can shake hands and go our separate ways. Or hopefully you see the value and we can continue to work with you. But we don't have any expectation of a further commitment, and we're asking for the same. How can you contact us? You can go and search online, castellaninformationsecurity.com. There's an email address, info@castellaninformationsecurity as well. You can find us on LinkedIn, or you can reach out, like I said, directly to Brent, Murray, or myself, and we'll be more than happy to connect with you. So just getting right to the end here, hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions as well. Information security applies to all organizations, regardless of your size, regardless of your geography, regardless of your business. Good security is a combination of physical security, IT countermeasures, and what I don't have here is governance. So good policies that are in place as well. All three of those together make for good security. Prevention is better than remediation. This is almost like a mantra that we have within our company. $1 in prevention is better than $10 a day, or even more in remediation. So better to prevent than to remediate. And I think our tagline that's going to go out in the next few weeks is prepare, prevent, protect. That's kind of the model we follow. Cultural change starts at the top. If you're a leader in your organization, it starts with you and you own it. And lastly, the one question that you have to always think about is that as a business owner, as a manager, or an IT professional, can you assure your customers, your stakeholders, your employees that you're doing everything you can to protect their sensitive information? And this is information that they have entrusted you with. Are you able to answer that question with a yes? That, I think, with that question, it brings us to the end of our presentation itself, but we still have a few minutes for questions. If there's any, we can entertain that as well. Brent, any questions on the chat?
Hi, Azar. Nothing through the chat. So maybe we can just open it up to the group, see if there's any questions or comments.
Sounds good. I think either everybody is, so shocked that they can't think of a question, or I did such a great job of presenting that there aren't any questions, which is highly unlikely.
It was fascinating. Thank you so much.
No problem.
It's definitely a lot to think about. And for a small yet growing town like Neepawa, I'm really glad we did this. And I have a lot to think about.